I think our belief in the purity of white depends in part on the view that non-white colours are impure. Now, we in the West have had a long-standing prejudice against colour. It's often called chromophobia. Academics call it chromophobia, the fear of colour. And it's been going for a long, long time. For a long time, philosophers and moralisers have accused colour of all kinds of sins. They've said it's, superficial or duplicitous or carnal or depraved. I mean, it's something ultimately not to be trusted. Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, he likened colours to mind-altering drugs. And there are lots of medieval clergy, medieval theologians, who believed that colour was this distraction, this terrible, dangerous, unethical distraction from faith itself. And that idea of colour as a kind of distraction is absolutely still present in the language we use. So if you think of the Latin word colorem, which is the ancestor of our word colour, it comes from the word celare, which means to hide or to conceal. So again, it's that sense of colour being a surface property that prevents us from seeing the truth that lies beyond. Similarly, if you say that someone's reputation has been ruined, you might say that reputation has been tainted. That's a word that comes from tint, for colour. If you think that your views of something have been unfairly affected by something someone has said, you will say your opinions have been coloured by something. So in many, many regards, even in the language we use today, we still think of colour as somehow deceptive, something that distracts us from the reality or diverts us from the truth. Now, by the 17th, 18th centuries, some philosophers, some tastemakers, some writers were even suggesting that we needed to get rid of colour altogether. That if you were to be a cultivated, refined person, then you needed to, go for as monochrome existence as possible. So I'll give you one example. This is Goethe, who I mentioned in the last talk. Goethe was a great lover and fan of colour, but this is what he wrote. He wrote, "Savage nations, uneducated people, and children have a great predilection for vivid colours. Animals are excited to rage by certain colours, but people of refinement," and there's that word refinement again that I was talking about with sugar and flour and rice, "people of refinement avoid vivid colours in the dress and the objects that are around them, and seem inclined to banish them altogether from their presence." And I think actually what we do see emerging in this period, in the 18th and 19th century, is very much an increased taste for plain things, for muted things, for white things. The most famous example, of course, is antiquity and neoclassicism. In the late medieval period, in the Renaissance, all these great ancient Greek and Roman sculptures started to be unearthed from the soil. It was an extremely exciting time. Those statues, most ancient Greek and Roman statues, had originally been covered in bright colours. But obviously over time they'd lost those colours, and when they were discovered, people presumed they had always been this plain white marble. And that led to this rising, growing aesthetic of whiteness in art in the Renaissance and thereafter. I mean, you think of Michelangelo's David. The aesthetic of Michelangelo's David is the pure white Carrara marble. But it's not just sculpture and art. I mean, you see it in porcelain. In the 18th century, there's a massive craze for white Chinese porcelain. And we also see artists painters who have all these colours at their disposal, beginning to embrace the aesthetic of whiteness. This is one of my favourite paintings. It's a painting by the French animal painter Jean-Baptiste Udry, and he painted it in 1753. It's called The White Duck. And it's a relatively, in some ways, conventional still life with a duck and various objects around it. But what is remarkable about it is the fact that it's entirely consisting of white products, white materials, white things. Now, Udry had been obsessed with white since he was an apprentice. He thought it was the very, very hardest colour to master as an artist. And this, towards the end of his career, is his way of saying, look, I can do it. I have mastered this most difficult colour. And I think he's also trying to say that, white, though we think of it sometimes as a nothingy thing, that it has all these different qualities. There are many textures, many hues, many shades and tones of white. that it contains almost everything, and it is such a wonderful colour that you don't need anything else.